The books I'm going to be talking about today. So today's video is summer recommendations. They're not even really summer like romance books or anything specific. They're just books that I think would make really good summer reads. Also, a lot of them are very fast-paced, so you can definitely finish them within the same day if you're looking for something that is quick and you're just taking like a day trip somewhere or just for a weekend. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the video. My first book recommendation of this video is none other than Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was one of my top reads this year. I just fell in love so much with the characters. I loved the storyline and the plot, and it was just a really wholesome book. So to give a little bit of a synopsis about this book, it's about a super workaholic literary agent named Nora. She lives in New York City, and she's one of those rare people who just really loves that fast-paced New York City lifestyle. She grew up in the city with her mom and her younger sister, Libby, and her mom actually dies of cancer. So you see her become kind of the backbone of the family and taking care of her sister. And throughout the book, you kind of start to see how this trauma of her mom dying manifests in her relationship with her sister. The kind of books that Nora publishes are romance books, specifically very cliche romance books where characters just like her leave the city life, go to a rural town somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and fall in love with someone and end up just never coming back. Funnily enough, this is the exact kind of town that her sister convinces her to go vacationing to together, and so they take this vacation to like a very small rural town. I forgot what state it is, but it's just basically in the middle of nowhere. And so in this town, she ends up running into her arch nemesis in the publishing world. His name is Charlie Lastra, and he has my whole heart. And he is actually from that same town. So he's from a very small town, and he went to New York for all the same reasons that Nora loves New York, just city life, the environment, all of that. Pretty soon you can guess the fireworks start, and they just start to fall in love with each other. And so throughout the book, you see Nora kind of reckoning with just falling in love with this small town, falling in love with him, but also kind of being caught between her love for New York and wanting to go back to that life. So kind of embodying the cliche books that she publishes herself. Getting into all the tropes and everything that this book has in it, it's definitely more enemies to lovers. You see them starting off hating each other, and then there's kind of like this forced proximity thing where they're forced to work on a project together. It's definitely the grumpy sunshine type of relationship between the two main characters. There's some serious spice throughout the book too, so if you're looking for some more steamy chapters, you'll definitely get some of that. It's also the I hate everyone in the world but you trope. Charlie Lastra, like, he's just something else. I can't even describe it. He's my favorite. Yeah, he's just amazing. And I think just the concept of having a book that revolves around two people who love books and make it their whole life is so different. I haven't really read that kind of book before, and it honestly made me rethink like my whole life path, because I think as readers, we all go through that phase when we're younger of like, oh yeah, like I want to be a writer, I want to be in publishing and read books all day, and I definitely had that, so it took me back to those days. Lastly, I would say that this book is very like small town vibes. Honestly, after I finished it, I thought about it for a few days, and it reminded me so much of the show Gilmore Girls. If you're a fan of that, then you know. But just the banter between Nora and Charlie is so similar to the banter that you see between Luke and Lorelai in the show. And just the sarcastic, the witty humor, the grumpy sunshine relationship. I think that's just one of the top tier tropes. Honestly, I love that so much. But yeah, you just see that manifest in their relationship, and it's just so fun to watch. And then also just Nora exploring the small town and all of these very eccentric, unique characters that exist in this town as well. It really keeps you intrigued throughout the entire book. I did want to read some quotes from this book, a couple of them, because for me personally, when I hear like a really deep or good quote, it makes me want to read a book. So this is my way of persuading you. But I'm gonna read the first one. Okay. That's life. You're always making decisions, taking paths that lead you away from the rest before you can see where they end. Maybe that's why we as a species love stories so much. All those chances for do-overs, opportunities to live the lives we'll never have. Okay, next quote. Life in New York was like being in a giant bookstore. All these trillions of paths and possibilities drawing dreamers into the city's beating heart, saying, I make no promises, but I offer many doors. And the last quote, my personal favorite. I read once that some flowers always orient themselves to face the sun. That's what being near Charlie Lastra is like for me. There could be a raging wildfire racing toward me from the west, and I'd still be straining eastward toward his warmth. If that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. Charlie Lastra is like the perfect human being. I think there's also another quote. It really stuck with me. It was, if he was telling Nora, if you're the wrong kind of woman, then I'm the wrong kind of man. And just kind of like him explaining how they're perfect for each other. I don't know, if you haven't read this book, it might not make sense, but if you want the context, please go read it, please. I'm begging you. So next book I have to recommend is The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood. I loved reading this book this summer. It was so fast, so fun. The characters were very quirky and lovable, so. Just a little summary about this book. It's the story of a character named Olive, who is a PhD candidate at Stanford. And she basically gets into a very complicated situationship. She is out with her best friend. Her best friend has a crush on her ex that she dated, but she's completely over him. The best friend doesn't want to like make her feel uncomfortable or anything by pursuing the ex. So she's like, no, I don't want to date him, you know. And so Olive, in an attempt to convince her best friend that she's over her ex, just kisses a random professor in one of the hallways at school. So now she's like in this very messy situationship. The professor turns out to be someone that she actually met before, when she was applying to the school. She hadn't like gotten into Stanford yet, and I think she was just there touring the campus, so she actually had met him before. And there's a little twist to that, which you'll find later on, but I don't want to spoil it. So the professor's name is Adam Carlson, and so they end up getting into like this fake dating situation because he also has his own reasons for wanting to make it appear like he has a personal life outside of his work. I don't want to explain the whole situation, but if you read this book, it's like the fake dating trope. So there's some plot twists sprinkled throughout the book that basically complicates the relationship, but all in all, they start to fall for each other and have really real feelings. And then Olive gets into a situation where her career is in danger and things just get very messy. To get into the tropes of this book, it's definitely another grumpy sunshine relationship between Olive and Adam. I think their relationship is so cute. They talk about like having a meet cute, which is adorable, I think. And there's like all these little unique details. They have like this deal where they do a Starbucks date every week. And he basically like pays for every Starbucks to make it seem like they're on a real date. And she orders just like the craziest drinks every week. It's always a new drink every week. And it's just so adorable to see like Adam just be like so disgusted by it, but he's falling in love with her. So there's definitely that. I would say the characters in this book are a little bit more simple, one-dimensional. The story's not as deep. It's a very fast, like, just summer romance book. There's not too much plot or, like, bigger story behind it. But I think it's still really cute. Olive is a really quirky, clumsy character. She reminds me of myself in a lot of ways. She's very awkward, but she's very real. And I think that's what a lot of us like about her. I'm starting to wonder if this is what being in love is. Being okay with ripping yourself to shreds so the other person can stay whole. Second quote is from Adam to Olive, and he says, I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. My heart. The next book is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I have to say, this wasn't one of my favorites. The reason why I'm putting it in this video is I feel like if I were back in my 14-year-old self in high school, I would have loved this book. just because it's one of those like very straightforward cliche romance books. But I think because I'm 22, I've kind of grown out of just reading like just pure romance and want more like character development, and I'm just looking for other things in books now. But I feel like for someone out there, this definitely can be your taste. But basically, Ugly Love is about a character named Tate, who is a nurse, and she just moved back in with her brother for a time just to like save up some money, and she meets her brother's neighbor named Miles Archer. Miles Archer and her brother are both pilots, so they work together, and both Tate and Miles become instantly attracted to each other, both sexually and emotionally, but they're just convinced that it's just a sexual relationship. First, they're very content with how the relationship is, and they basically just hook up for fun. But Tate starts to develop like these deeper feelings for Miles, and Miles does reciprocate, but he has like a very sad, dramatic past that will come up in the book that keeps him from like returning her feelings with effort. He's basically convinced himself that he can't like fall in love with someone else, which I don't know, reading this book I was like, that's so stupid, I don't understand. But I feel like if I were my 14-year-old high school self, I definitely would have been hooked by this book, and just even though it's like so one-dimensional. So they kind of develop this toxic relationship. It gets pretty ugly. They're kind of like off and on because of the feelings, and basically the question of the book is whether Miles is going to grow up and be mature enough to face his demons, heal from them, and move on to have a future with Tate. Obviously, it's a brother's best friend book, so there's a little bit of conflict that Tate's brother adds to the scenario, just because her brother doesn't really want her dating any of his friends. The relationship is very much like a soft love. Yeah, I think it's very like, it reminds me of something that's like very innocent, friends to lovers, but also like in a weird way 50 Shades of Grey. Like kind of like the relationship between Christian and Anna in a way, just because like their relationship starts off just with sex, and it is like that like 50% through the book, so it's very fast paced. I read it in the same day. I don't think it took me more than like 4 or 5 hours even too, so definitely doable if you're like taking a day trip or something. Like I said, this wasn't exactly my taste now, but 14-year-old me would have loved it, so I would highly recommend if you're kind of like in that teenage phase still, where you're just looking for a good love story. Whoever coined the phrase "I love you to death" obviously never experienced the kind of love Tate and I share. If that were the case, the phrase would be "I love you to life," because that's exactly what Tate did. She loved me back to life. I will say, I think the writing quality in this book is pretty like up there. I think Colleen does a really good job with writing quality just in a lot of her books, honestly. So I think that's one thing I enjoyed. Next book I want to talk about is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, another Colleen read. I had very mixed feelings about this one, to be honest. I don't feel like it lived up to the book talk hype, but it was interesting. I feel like I didn't really know how to rate this one. So basically the book is about a character named Lily. Her dad has just passed away, and she grew up witnessing a very abusive situation with her dad always abusing her mom, and she just grows up having a lot of confusion about why her mom didn't leave the relationship. So she kind of looks back on that a lot. She's older now, she lives in Boston, she just opened up a flower shop. She's always had like a passion for gardening and growing flowers and stuff, so that's where she's at in her life right now. And she meets a neurosurgeon, I believe he's a neurosurgeon or surgeon, named Ryle Kincaid. And at first the relationship is going very well, even though he has mentioned that he just didn't want to be in a relationship. His career was always so important to him, and it came first. And then she ends up in the same cycle of abuse that her mom was with her dad. And she finally understands what it's like to love someone who hurts you. And to make things even worse, she runs into her childhood love. His name is Atlas Corrigan, And he also lives in Boston now and owns his own restaurant, which you find out later on he named after her. So things get very interesting. Ryle finds out that they had this relationship and the abuse just continually keeps getting worse and worse. And I don't want to reveal too much about what happens toward the end, but she is basically faced with choosing to stay in the same cycle of abuse that her mom endured for so many years, and that could very well possibly kill her, or escaping the relationship and leaving Ryle. Obviously it has like a childhood love story, friends to lovers between Lily and Atlas, and then them finding each other again. And there's a lot of like really unique little details about their story. They both wanted to grow up, follow their dreams, and live in Boston. So you see all those little like details manifest throughout the book and throughout the character growth. There's a lot of character growth in this book, I'd like to admit. I think it was really interesting to kind of have more of an insight into why people stay in an abusive relationship. Colleen, who's the author, talks about how the book is based off of her mom being in an abusive relationship, and how a lot of the incidents that happen in the book are based on things that her mom experienced, and that just made it like really real to me. I think that's the part that really made me want to cry, just the fact that these are things that actually happen to a person. But it's really interesting to kind of see the psychology behind why people stay, so it's very eye-opening in that way. One thing I didn't like about this book is that there is a pregnancy trope. I've started to read a few books with the pregnancy trope, and at first I didn't really mind it, but I feel like it's really starting to bother me. It's just taking away from kind of the quality and essence of the book and the main story about it. I do think the pregnancy is relevant to like the story's overall message, but it just wasn't my favorite part. And of course, like, there are definitely trigger warnings for abuse, so I would just keep that in mind when you're reading this. It does get pretty graphic into those experiences. I personally, when I was reading this book, had to take a lot of breaks because it was just very emotionally draining, and it kind of made like my anxiety go up sometimes, to be honest. Like, my heart would literally pound out of my chest, and I never really had those feelings reading a book before, so that was definitely new for me. Just because someone hurts you doesn't mean you can simply stop loving them. It's not a person's actions that hurt the most, it's the love. If there was no love attached to the action, the pain would be a little easier to bear. And last one, in the future, if by some miracle you ever find yourself in the position to fall in love again, fall in love with me. Okay. Next book is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I don't have the physical copy with me, so I'm gonna go ahead and like post a picture here, hopefully. And you can see like the cover of it. It's a beautiful cover. Honestly, one of my favorites. So yeah, but the book is about two twin siblings. Their names are Jude and Noah. They are best friends for life up until their mom passes away. And there's a fight that happens right before she passes away. She ends up getting into a car accident after like telling the family that her and the dad are getting divorced. And so the siblings, you know, like become estranged. They end up blaming themselves. They kind of blame each other as well for the car accident. And the book is just really about how both siblings process their grief and the loss of her in different ways, and just also reckoning with the fact that they are growing apart despite how inseparable they used to be. And there's kind of like a turning point towards the end that makes both of them realize just how much they need each other, and they really need to see more in each other, and be able to be open and vulnerable with each other like they used to be prior to their mom dying. So that's basically the plot. This is one of my top favorite books of all time. Like literally, if you asked me my list just of all time, my number one is always the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. Second one that just recently became a favorite and got me back into reading is the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And the third one is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. this book, for some reason, has stuck with me for years. There's also a little bit of romance in the book. I wouldn't say this book is primarily focused on romance, though. It's very primarily focused on the relationship between the siblings, so that's pretty different from a lot of the books I've talked about in this video. Meeting your soulmate is like walking into a house you've been in before. You will recognize the furniture, the pictures on the wall, the books on the shelves, the contents of drawers. You could find your way around in the dark if you had to. Okay, so that's technically all the books in this video that I'm going to recommend as summer reads. There are like 2 series of 3 books each that I want to just mention as like honorable mentions because I think they're really good summer reads. The first book is Anna and the French Kiss, which has been really popular. The other 2 books, one is called Isla and the Happily Ever After, and the last one is called Lola and the Boy Next Door. I think these are perfect for if you're in your high school romance phase still. I think they're very cute. Friends to Lovers. Isla and the Happily Ever After is about a falling for like the bad boy. And then Lola and the Boy Next Door. Very self-explanatory. It's like the boy next door trope and Friends to Lovers as well. My personal favorite and a lot of people's favorite is Anna and the French Kiss, so I would highly recommend starting with that one. But honestly, I've really loved all 3 of them. And then the second series that I want to mention, the first one is called Love and Gelato. It's a summer romance that takes place in Italy. Honestly, my least favorite of the 3. They just made a movie out of it. It wasn't that good too, if you're wondering, but I did like the book. It wasn't my favorite of the 3 though. There's also Love and Luck, which takes place in Ireland. My ultimate favorite was Love and Olives. It takes place in Greece, and it's about a girl named Olive who reunites with her estranged father in Greece for a project. She ends up falling in love with her father's like assistant that's helping him with this project, and it's just about their adventures in Greece and also her kind of finding a new relationship with her dad. There's a big plot twist in this book that will make you cry your eyes out. I think I was sobbing the whole time. I also really love the way this book was organized. When her dad like first left her, he left behind like a certain number of like objects, and so every chapter starts with one of the things that he left behind, and so Olive kind of talks about each thing individually, and it's just really heartfelt and emotional. I didn't expect to cry with this book, but it was so heart-wrenching. But that's it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed watching. Please let me know your thoughts on any of the books I discussed today if you read them. I think these are all perfect for summer, like I said, so I hope you pick these up too if you haven't. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching my first video. Feel free to leave some love in the comments. I've linked all my social media accounts in the description, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.